Good morning, and to our witnesses, Wayne Welkel and Tom Miller, good morning to you. This is Vermont House Transportation Committee. Welcome today to February 22nd. Our guest testimony this morning from the Alliance of Automotive Innovation. We're on live stream. We got Wayne Whitehill. Did I get that right, Wayne?
That's correct. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tom Miller. They're both from the Alliance. And we should introduce ourselves to you because I believe this is the first time you all have been in our room. So we'll start with Representative Bartholomew down on the end of the table. Introduce himself.
Look at the camera. John Bartholomew from Heartland, also representing Windsor and West Windsor.
Hi, Phil Pouch, representing Heinsberg.
Molly Burke, Brattleboro. Kate Lally from Shelburne.
Tim Corcoran, Bennington.
Butch Shaw from Pittsburgh.
Leonora Dodge from Essex.
Scott Campbell from St. Johnsbury.
Heidi McCoy from Poultney.
Thank you. And you are, gentlemen?
Tom, I'll let you go first.
Tom's muted.
I threw him a curveball, sorry.
Okay.
Just making sure he had his coffee.
Trying to behave myself with my mute off. My name is Tom Miller. I am a senior director at the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, responsible for California Air Resource Board, Advanced Clean Cars 2, and also Section 177 states that adopt the California ACC2 regulation.
Thank you, Wayne.
Great. My name is Wayne Weichel, also with the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. I am the Vice President of State Government Affairs. We are, for introduction's sake, a DC trade association. We represent the automakers that produce nearly 98% of all new light-duty vehicles in the U.S. each year. Essentially, that means everyone except Tesla, Rivian, and Lucid. We also represent a number of tier one suppliers like Panasonic or Denso. We represent autonomous vehicle technology companies. We represent chip makers. And we represent other technology companies also in the industry. We're responsible for about 10 million jobs, and we're about 5% of the overall economy.
Provided a paper handout, and you're also on our web page under today's date and documents. That's posted by an able committee assistant. And so, gentlemen, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity. Vermont has been doing great things in this space, and we appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk about what's going on in the rest of the country. There's been a lot of changes in the last 24 months. And we look forward to the opportunity to kind of talk through some of the changes and also what Vermont's been doing, what's been going well, and sort of what needs to keep happening. As Tom introduced himself, he's from our E&E Energy and Environment team. He joined the association somewhat recently, but he was brought on specifically to help Northeast states, what we refer to as the 177 states that have opted to follow California's clean air rules. I thought it'd be a great opportunity to introduce him to the group and walk through some slides that you've been presented that sort of talk about EVs, where we are and where we're going. And I will hand it over to Tom.
All right, thanks, Wayne. I will share my screen. 1 second here while I
share. Does he have shared?
Right.
Good job.
And can everyone see that?
We can see that, but we have all your. Can you make it a full screen for your presentation?
I will. Yes. Thank you.
Please. Thank you.
Is that better?
That's the one. Thank you.
That is the one. Okay. Okay, so again, I'd like to thank Chairwoman Coffey and Vermont House Transportation Committee for allowing us to speak today.
Tom, excuse me, Tom, we've lost your screen.
What is going on?
Okay.
Host
We're gonna
disabled.
okay, we have a technical difficulty here. We're fixed. Okay, now you're back up. We want to.
Let's try that. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
I didn't hear what you had to say, Tom. I'm sorry.
It said host disabled screen sharing.
You're sharing is disabled. Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
now you're our co-host, Tom, so maybe it'll work.
Let's try that.
Okay. We love the technology, but we're just not at it yet.
Yeah, that's how it goes, right? I mean, it's always always got a plan for something.
Thank you. We're all set.
Okay. Again, I'd like to thank Chairwoman Coffey and the Vermont House Transportation Committee for allowing us to speak at today's meeting. I also want to apologize. I made a late addition to the slide deck. I understand you guys have paper copies, so you'll notice that there's one page that is missing in your deck that I'll talk about today. But I'll make sure that we get the new deck to you today as soon as possible. So apologize for that. Let's see here. There we go.
There we go.
Okay, so again, just kind of real quick, Wayne kind of went over this, but Auto Innovators and its 41 member companies are committed to achieving the net zero carbon transportation future for America's cars and light trucks. And the auto industry is investing $1.2 trillion globally by 2030 to advance vehicle electrification. And will increase the number of EV models available from 83 today to around 245 models by the year 2026. So with the right complementary policies in place, Auto Innovators and our members announced our support of the goal of achieving 40 to 50% of U.S. new light-duty vehicle market share of EVs nationally by the year 2030. Next slide. Okay, so in December 2022, Vermont adopted the CARB ACC2 regulation that will require all new vehicle sales to be zero-emission vehicles, or ZEVs, by 2035. So for those that may not be familiar with these new electric vehicles, there are three types of EVs that are considered ZEVs. Those are plug-in hybrid vehicles, or PHEVs, battery electric vehicles, or BEVs, and fuel cell electric vehicles, or FCEVs. And based on the recent ACC2 regulation, only these types of vehicles will be sold as new in Vermont by 2035. And this shows just a few examples of some of the ones that are out in the market today. So this slide here shows the California ACC2 regulation that require very aggressive increase in electric vehicle sales, starting with model year 2026. Vermont ZEV sales were comprised of about 6.8% of new vehicle sales in 2022. And this can be compared to California's 19.4% of ZEV sales for that same period. The challenge of reaching the CARB ACC2 mandate of 35% in 2026, 43% in 2027, and 51% in 2028 to all the way to 100% electric vehicle market share by 2035 requires Vermont to address several hurdles to consumer acceptance. As it currently stands, Vermont must increase its ZEV sales by more than fivefold in about 3 model years when this regulation begins in 2026. These are staggering required sales increases for new technology that relies heavily on customer acceptance and market readiness. As the required more than fivefold sales increase needed is based on 2022 EV sales, where the average transaction price of an electric vehicle is now about $58,725. This is actually down from as high as a $64,000 average this year. Based on the average transaction price of EVs, EV buyers are far more likely to be affluent single-family homeowners with modern electric panels just a few feet from their garage where they'll charge their EVs. These buyers are not, they don't really represent the full cross-section of Vermont's new car buyers, and achieving 30, 70, or 100% of the new car market will require reaching buyers of more moderate means. It's also going to require action well beyond what the automaker's ability to produce more EVs. But we applaud the comprehensive approach that Vermont legislature has taken towards the electrified future. In June last year, we passed the Vermont's largest transportation bill into law, which was $36.25 million going towards programs that reduce carbon emissions from the transportation sector. Vermont's off to a great start in creating a strong public EV charging network. In fact, on a per 100,000 person metric, Vermont is #1 in the country. However, we looked at California's metric ratio of the zero emission vehicles as charging ports to gauge a more accurate determining of the charging infrastructure readiness. So this looks at charging ports per electric vehicle on the road versus population. So we're saying that California says that they should be about 1 charging port for every 7 electric vehicles. And this next slide will show that. So this graph shows the required growth of ZEVs in Vermont to meet the CARB ACC2 requirement. It visualizes the annual ZEV sales growth per ACC2, plus adding the renewing annual registrations. And we also considered a 10% yearly scrap rate for things like car accidents where the car may be pulled. But the orange curve shows a ZEV to charging port rate growth of 1 charging port per 7 ZEV vehicles, while the gray is a 1 to 10 ratio. And again, this is based on the California recommended plan. So according to the energy.gov website, Vermont has 621 charging ports for 6,099 electric vehicles. So that's actually very good. It's a 1 to 10 ratio of ZEVs to EV charging ports, just under 1 to 10. And like I said, that currently meets the ratio that California recommends. However, there's still a long way to go. In order to support the prospect of 100% ZEV only state in 2035, our analysis suggests that Vermont's charging capabilities will need to increase over 4,700% in the next 12 years to be in line with California's infrastructure assessment of 7 to 1 EVs to charging ports. However, what's also good for California may not always be what's best for Vermont. In fact, based on the vast differences between California and Vermont, we've seen, of course, that EV charging range affected by cold weather and also by steeper terrains. So this combined with the active lifestyle of Vermont residents, we recommend that Vermont target a 1 to 7 ratio or better to ensure that the infrastructure meets the user needs of Vermont drivers. There we go. So sorry, so this is a slide that I added last night. I'll make sure you get it. But I wanted to highlight a few things. One, that really that public charging is not enough. Again, you're doing a great job with your the rate of your public charging and your infrastructure plans. However, public charging is more expensive than charging at home. Numerous studies have found that 80% of EV charging occurs at home, making access to home charging a top priority for customers considering EV. The converse is also true. The lack of access to home charging is a major barrier to EV adoption. Vermont must consider those that rent their homes, such as those who live in multi-family dwellings. So I wanted to show this example of the cost difference of charging at home versus charging at a public DC charger, fast charger. So to calculate the cost of charging at home, or actually just calculate the cost of charging rather, it's pretty simple. So you just multiply the cost per kilowatt hour with the battery's maximum capacity. So in this example, we're looking at a 2023 Chevy Bolt that has a battery capacity of 66 kilowatt hours. The average household electricity rate in Vermont is about 17 cents per kilowatt hour. So if we multiply 66 by 17 cents, we get the cost of $11.23 to charge this Bolt at home. So very low cost, very economical, and much cheaper than fueling a gas powered. So now if we look at the cost to charge at a public DC fast charger, and these are the ones you would find typically on the side of the freeway where you want to stop and charge your vehicle faster. That rate jumps to about 63 cents per kilowatt hour. So again, multiplying 66 by 63 cents, we get a cost of about $41.77 to publicly fast charge that same vehicle. So that's almost 4 times more expensive than charging. So if you're on a trip or something, of course, that's the cost. It's maybe not terrible. But for somebody that's living in an apartment building or a place they're renting that they don't own and there is no access to electric charging, you can imagine the hurdle or the limitation of them possibly considering an electric vehicle because they don't really have a good place to charge, or it's going to cost them more money to charge. So that's just one factor, but there's several factors that will affect mass adoption. And we consider mass adoption of about 80% ZEVs, which would be about 2032, according to the CARB schedule. We need to address all of these factors, and they're all interdependent on one another. So ZEVs, as I mentioned, are still more expensive than gas cars to purchase. So we need consumers to become more familiar with this technology and they're trusted. And we're working on that, with the OEMs from association as well. But infrastructure needs need to be convenient, easy to use, and accessible to all economic demographics. It's not enough to say that people in multifamily dwellings should visit public chargers weekly, wait hours to charge a vehicle, and pay more than those that live in luxury, have the luxury rather of charging their vehicles at home. So, as Wayne said, together we're willing to work to address these factors that will affect market feasibility and find solutions to strong ZEV growth in Vermont. So there's a lot of work to still be done to hit those curves that I showed, not just in Vermont, but across the nation. But to achieve our shared objectives, it requires collaboration and a sustained commitment to fund and execute supportive programs and policies. The challenge to reach 100% EV market by 2035 requires Vermont to address several hurdles to consumer acceptance. There are a lot of important complementary measures needed for success, but some of those are not limited to what I have shown here, which is ensuring low to moderate income and multi-family housing residents have the identical access to low cost, convenient, and reliable level 2 home charging that single family homeowners enjoy. Adopting private and public state fleet requirements equivalent to or greater than the requirements in AC2. Deploying convenient, reliable, and affordable access to public EV charging and hydrogen refueling stations, as well as monitoring to ensure reliability at low power rates. Installing 350 kilowatt DC fast chargers near highways and airports, and also considering installing hydrogen fueling stations at airports. Adopting building codes, addressing new construction and retrofit requirements for EV-ready residential and commercial parking. And ensuring grid resiliency and utility electric rates that provide low-cost EV charging. Also, we support the increasing of EV tax credits for EVs through 2028, as well as funding any state-level point-of-sale rebates. I believe that brings me to the end. So I'd like to thank all of you again for allowing us to speak today on this important transition in Vermont to an all-electric future.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Miller. Sorry to miss the beginning, but this was a really helpful presentation. Thank you for bringing this to us. And I want to, if it's okay with you, I'd like to open up to our committee for some questions. If folks have questions for you, yeah, Representative Pouch.
Madam Chair, could you go back to the public DC fast charging, the 63 cents a kilowatt hour? Where does that come from? You know, is it an average or it's higher than I expected? And then I'm wondering if Tesla charges those same rates.
Very good question. So that information came from a recent study done by the BBC. Last year, the prices were about 43 cents a kilowatt hour, but they've gone up about 42% recently, which now are topping about 63 cents. So when you charge publicly, they also charge, it's not just the rate of electricity, it's kind of a combined cost. So there's a service fee, you know, it can be a delivery fee. So those EVgo companies that, you know, they're making money off the charging as well. So it's not just the electric companies, it's whoever owns the charging as well. And that's the recent rate that we've seen published based on our research.
Okay, I think there's a follow-up.
It does fluctuate.
So there's a follow-up.
Just a follow-up. Thanks for the information. Are there any moves in California or anywhere else to regulate regulate what private companies can charge on these?
I haven't seen anything. I'm not sure if Wayne has seen anything on that, but
No, if I can jump in, Madam Chair, I have not seen anything on that, but I do think it's important to point out that the example that Tom is using is a DC fast charging. That would be what is sort of conceived as sort of side of the highway when you need as much energy as you can get as quickly as you can get. These are the ones that you talk about going from 20% charge to 80% charge in 25 minutes. It's the real extreme. I do not believe the prices that this represent would be these would be higher than what you would typically see in a workplace level 2 charger, where you're plugging in and leaving it charged for maybe 5 or 6 hours. It's counterintuitive. Using it for a much longer time is probably going to cost less than the on-demand high charge that you would get for those DC fast chargers, which we don't think are what people will be using on a regular basis. They're more of a great slide. They're more of a niche a niche piece. Tom, I'll let you speak to this if it's okay with the chair.
Please, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to actually add this slide in, but since I already added one slide, I didn't want to speak to this slide in here. But I can add this in as well and send out feedback if it's helpful. But this does show what Wayne was talking about. So in my case, I did show, so level 1 or even level 2, this would be what you charge typically at home. So level 1 is if you just plug it into like a 3-prong outlet in your garage or somewhere in your house. It's going to charge very slowly. You'll get about 3 to 6 miles of range added to the battery per hour. So this is the charger that may come with the vehicle because of course everyone has that type of plug they can plug into at their home. They buy an electric vehicle. However, the level 2 charger is what most people would probably have installed in their house. This would be like your electric dryer or electric range type of plug. It's that bigger, maybe a 4-prong style plug, and that'll charge your vehicle about 20 to 40 miles an hour. So this is what would give you your charge overnight. You come home from work, you plug it in, and you have about at least 5 hours to charge your vehicle. You're going to be able to fill up most of your battery for that commute. But as Wayne said, on the side of the road, as you're traveling or driving next to your corridors or your transit hubs, highway freeway exit, you need to charge fast. You're going to use a level 3 DC fast charger, which will put about 250 to 500 miles of range per hour on this. So, but the kilowatt is actually still, what's being measured. So some people will say the cost per hour, but we feel it's more accurate to look at, how big the battery is and how many kilowatts you're trying to stuff into that battery versus
Are you also? I think we have a couple more questions, and I'd love to get them in before we have to shift. So, Representative McCoy.
So, I noticed you had mentioned a service fee and a delivery fee, as well as the electricity cost on the DC fast charging for the 4177. Are there any states that actually add an additional charge, like a gas tax we have in the state of Vermont that we pay? There's a federal gas tax and then state gas tax. Are there taxes on EV charging stations that get submitted to the?
That is a great question. I do not know the answer to that myself. I don't handle the infrastructure part of our research, but I can definitely follow up on that and see.
Okay. Yeah. Madam Vice Chair, I can answer that. Tom, would you mind stop sharing your screen?
Certainly.
Yeah, it's easier. Madam Chair, it is something that is out there in the sphere of policy at the moment. There are a couple states, I think Oklahoma was recently considering how do we tax, especially the DC fast chargers, which are designed to capture people using highways and maybe transiting through your state and may not be otherwise captured by a state fee or something like that. And how do you, work around that sort of issue that you would otherwise be capturing gas tax at a, rest stop or something of that nature? I don't know if any state has actually implemented it. I think we might have some pilot programs going on. I think there might be discussions going on, but that is one thing that's out there of, how do you capture non-residents that otherwise would pay into a gas tax?
Right. Okay, thank you very much.
I think Representative Campbell, you had.
Yes, thanks. I'm wondering what role the Alliance has advocating with the EV charging networks to improve the maintenance of their facilities. We hear a lot about chargers that are not working. People stop, there's only one or two plugs and then they're not working. It's a real problem. And then also access. So instead of having, I don't know how many different networks there are, have dozens. Instead of having a card for each one, does the Alliance have any role in sort of advocating for standardizing that?
Yeah, we would agree with your first point wholeheartedly. Downtime is what's referred to in the industry. Downtime is a really big problem. We don't represent any of the EV infrastructure companies, so I can't really speak to why that is. I think part of it is anecdotally, it's because they're so focused on growth and permitting and moving on to the next thing that maybe they don't have all their ducks in line to fix the ones that they already have in place. But it is absolutely something we hear from, it's covered in the media and, anecdotally from consumers. And, think of it from a consumer perspective. When you're plotting out, I'm going to drive here because I know I have the range to get there. And now you get there and either there's a line because there's not enough, or it's not working or only one's working. I mean, it's a serious problem.
Well, just if I can interrupt for just 1 second. So I'm just wondering if the Alliance has a role, since you represent or you have members who are manufacturers, to advocate with the charging networks, to get their game up.
We're fully supportive of uptime. I'll be honest, I have not seen a policy angle to it yet that sort of captured it well, that I think is a model that we could refer the state to. But it's a problem and it needs to be addressed. I mean, having chargers that don't work is the equivalent of having no chargers. So.
Great. Well, I see we have a group of folks coming in at 9 o'clock. So why do we have our last question? Representative?
Well, anyway.
I just saw John, but who?
Yeah, no, my question is, there was a recommendation here for hydrogen charging ports. I'm just wondering the logic behind that, since I don't think any hydrogen cars are sold here, or that we have any even registered here. So why would we invest in that kind of infrastructure?
Sure, that is the classic chicken and the egg situation. Unlike an EV where you can sort of triage and charge at home and find other ways to charge, unless there's a hydrogen charging station, you cannot drive there. So at the moment, those chargers those cars are only sold in California. I believe there is something around the number of 50-ish hydrogen chargers in the entire state of California, and there's one in the rest of the country. We're not saying that's near term, but for a lot of mid-weight, medium duty, sort of larger vehicles, and when you get into heavy duty vehicles, which I know Vermont has been talking about and looking at the heavy duty mandate, those vehicles probably can't carry enough batteries to power those vehicles. So you really are talking about hydrogen being probably a more logical fit. We're not saying that's a near term. You have to go out and do it in 2023 by the end of the year, but at some point there needs to be a plan to build it out, because it is an important part of the sort of puzzle of this electrification transition. We appreciate the time, Madam Chair. We do have a necessary conditions document that sort of touches on a lot of these things. Vermont's doing great compared to other states, but the challenge is you have to keep doing this and keep doing it and keep doing it. And this transition is going to take a lot of work by many different parties. You guys are out ahead of all your peers, and keep it up. Your VTrans has a great NEVI plan for infrastructure, and just anyway, we're happy to come back and answer any specific questions either in front of the group or separately. But we'll follow up with our necessary conditions document, and if there's anything else we can do, appreciate the time.
That would be great to get that, and thank you again for coming in and speaking with the committee. We know it's not a one and done. We don't do it 1 year, so thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Great. So we have some folks. I'm wondering. I think they're waiting. Their next group of people. Yeah. Do you mind just letting me know that our next group is coming in today? Today is.
Just a reminder.
Yeah.
Yep.
It makes it-
Yeah. Thank you, Jeannie.
Yeah, I think they're all.
Welcome.
All right, let's just, let's see.
I think-
12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17.
We're good. Yeah. Let's not.
21, is 21 okay?
Yeah, I think it's just if people can come in, we're not, thank you for being, yeah, come on in. So Katie, I'm looking to you. Are you gonna help organize your group here? Why don't you come on in and why don't you kick us off?
Okay.
Yeah. And great.
This is our full group. Thank you so
Happy
much.
Transportation Day, right?
Yes. I hope some of you were able to grab some coffee and goodies downstairs. Sorry, I'm just pulling out my.
And it takes it transfer. Yeah. And I don't know, great, if you have handouts or things that you want to put on the screen.
Yeah. Sorry.
We will be happy to accommodate you. So come on in, and there's a second chair if somebody wants to, anybody wants to join you, feel free to pull that up to the table.
So I'm gonna kick us off, and then I'm gonna pass it over, I think, to Jonathan next. I have Jeannie, I sent some of my slides. I'm not sure if you were able to get them.
I think what we've asked, most of the time we ask the person in your seat to run those slides.
Oh, okay.
So if we need to take a minute to.
Is that all right? They're also not super critical of.
No, let's see your slides. It's great. So now we have, and the technology is.
Do you have?
No, this is a stupid.
You know what, then if they're not that big, Jeannie, could you help
Hope you won't do anything. Sure.
Things not passed down.
Yes, and unfortunately. did not have a stapler, so I'm gonna
Well, if you have
separate.
enough printed copies, then why don't we just do that? And the documents should be on
We
our,
have them on our.
yeah, we have them on our committee.
Okay, great.
We can follow along with you.
Okay, so this, I'm gonna pass out first is a two-page of my testimony.
Okay, so.
And then I've also printed out for the committee, the testimony of Peter, who's representing the Vermont Center for Independent Living, who's gonna be joining us virtually.
Okay.
Send that around.
As soon?
He should be. Rob, would you be able to send an email to Peter and just make sure that he has the Zoom information?
I asked for some.
One more, just in case. And so my slides are on the computer. You have my written testimony. So I will.
Yeah, great. Well, welcome, Kate. If you can just identify yourself for the record, and then as we know you have a large group, so it's great. We'll just introduce each person as they come in. That would be great. So
Sounds good.
Transportation Committee.
Thank you so much, everybody, for having us here. My name is Katie Gallagher.
Excuse me, committee. Like if people, we have somebody in our who's giving testimony, let's give them the respect and our attention.
I am the Sustainable Communities Program Director for the Vermont Natural Resources Council, which is a statewide environmental group. And as part of that role, I help to coordinate transportation for Vermonters, which is what we are here today. And so I really appreciate you being able to take the time to hear from a group of us today. We are a cross-sector coalition that is committed to working together to try and figure out how we can best support and create a transportation system that works for all Vermonters, that is sustainable, that is accessible, and that also recognizes the fact that we live in a rural state and we have real legitimate challenges. So this group came together in 2017 to try to start to bridge that gap and fill in the need for advocacy as we saw it in the State House to talk about how we can more impact policy in this realm, which we really appreciate the work of this committee over the past several years to kind of lead us in that direction and shape our transportation policy more in the realm of sustainable and accessible transportation. Just a quick run through of what we're planning for today. I'm going to give just a brief overview of who Transportation for Vermonters is as a coalition.
Just hold a second. Yeah. Great. I think Jonathan is, yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. It's okay. We just want feedback. Good. All right. We're all set.
I'm also going to touch just high level about transportation funding and our kind of thoughts there. I'm going to then hand it over to Jonathan Weber at Local Motion to talk about bike ped issues and complete streets. Rob Kidd at the Sierra Club will then talk about electric vehicles and electric bike incentives. And Clayton, where are you? From Green Mountain Transit is going to talk about public transit funding. I know you've been able to hear from him in the past, which is fantastic. And then we're going to hear from Sophia and Peter, who are going to be talking from the perspectives of the Vermont Energy Education Program and the Vermont Center for Independent Living, just more broadly on transportation experiences, which is what we're really trying to do, is kind of lift up the voices of those who are most impacted by our kind of lack of transportation options. And then we've built in time at the end for questions and answers. So that's the plan, but please feel free to ask questions as they come up.
I can try to help facilitate. I see some folks are joining us on Zoom. Some of your great.
Oh, great.
Peter and John.
Peter. A little bit about Transportation for Vermonters. We have currently 15 member organizations, and on hopefully my printed testimony, yes, thank you. And on the slides, there is the full list. We have AARP Vermont, CarShare Vermont, Chittenden Area Transportation Management Association, CATMA, Green Mountain Transit, Local Motion, Old Spokes Home, Renewable Energy Vermont, Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility, the Vermont chapter of the Sierra Club, Vermont Clean Cities Coalition, Vermont Center for Independent Living, Vermont Energy Education Program, Vermont Energy Investment Corporation, VNRC, and VPIRG. So that's a broad group. We also have about a dozen or so other non-advocacy affiliates who meet with us regularly and help to inform our policy and positions. Those include Energy Action Network, Conservation Law Foundation, Capstone Community Action. So just kind of want to name all those groups, one, because they dedicate a lot of their time and effort to working and supporting this coalition, but also to give you kind of a sense of the breadth of the groups that we are working with, and how we think about transportation, which is, not just how we pave roads and build bridges, but also in terms of outcomes. It's fundamentally about how we get to work. It's how we're able to choose where we live and, connect with our family members and friends and access healthcare and so on and so forth. I want to steal your computer. So we formed, again, recognizing we've already done a lot as a state, from Complete Streets legislation. VTrans has done a lot of work in recent years to help incorporate more bike ped work, thanks to John Kaplan, and others who are really moving us more towards a sustainable and accessible transportation system. And yet we still have a lot to do in a number of areas related to transportation. We have a number, so on the kind of next slide, if you're following along, we look at it from this broad perspective, and I'm not going to spend too much time talking about all of the benefits of a sustainable, accessible transportation system, because I hope I'm kind of preaching to the choir. But it's really, I think, important to think about transportation again in terms of those outcomes, right? So, and thinking also about the challenges that our current system poses for current Vermonters and future Vermonters. So I know as Kelly Stoddard, report from ARP, shared with your committee, I think last week, we have, from ARP's perspective, but this is the case more broadly as well, we have an aging population. We have literally built our communities, both in terms of housing and infrastructure and transportation, for a certain able-bodied type of individual and family that is not true across all people, and is going to continue and increase to be not the case. So we need to change the way that our communities are built to actually support those folks to remain in our communities. So this is an accessibility issue. It's an affordability issue. We know that transportation is the second highest cost for Vermont households after housing, which is incredibly unaffordable for families with childcare. That childcare then takes number two. So it's a big cost, as we know. It's even higher for us living in northern states where there's salt and all the other impacts on personal vehicles. This is also very much an environmental issue. We know that over 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions comes from the transportation sector. And again, a lot of this is due to the fact that we have built our communities in such a way that we are dependent on personal vehicles. So we are dedicated to trying to shift that transportation, to address our environmental goals, to boost our individual and collective economic success, and create stronger economies. Let's see. So we also wanted to acknowledge that we are working collectively to address and implement the recommendations of the Climate Action Plan, which highlighted transportation as a major need to address the climate crisis. But also, this is a really critical aspect of our housing and affordability crisis. And again, to ensure that we can support an aging population. So as we're thinking about how to leverage and take advantage of federal funds coming in, and how we can kind of shift this narrative and how we think about transportation, we think we have a really great opportunity to make some significant changes to have a transportation system that works for all Vermonters. So before I pass it off to my colleagues, just wanted to touch briefly on what I think of as the big question, which is money. Because as you all know, transportation is not cheap. There are a lot of things that I find really exciting about transportation, especially at the local level when we think about complete streets and certain kind of creative projects that we can do to create safer streets. But things like infrastructure, sidewalks, incentives for EVs, those all take money. And we recognize that our existing revenue streams are declining. We're also going to have increasing cost requirements for these projects, but also as we think about the impact of a changing climate on our roads and infrastructure, that's going to continue to climb as well. So we know that it is absolutely critical that we have new and equitable funding tools to ensure both significant and certain pollution reductions from the climate perspective, but also raising long-term sustained revenues to be able to invest in vehicle electrification, transit, microtransit, all of these other transportation demand strategies that we need to accommodate our Vermont population. The Climate Action Plan recommends a cap and invest type of program for the transportation sector. They are still working on exactly what that looks like, and I know that's come up in conversation a bit, but highlighting the need for some kind of comparable approach to drive this sustained long-term revenue is something that we feel it needs to be at the forefront of the conversation, because as it currently stands, you know, we come back year after year, not just us, but you know, talking about how we need more money for transportation and we need all these new programs, and you know, so we need sustainable funding, and that is a challenging conversation, but one that we want to kind of raise to the top. In the meantime, we also know that we have real gaps in our current funding structure for things like transit. Clayton will speak more to that, and I just wanted to raise the Mobility and Transportation Grant Program as one that I think has proven to be really successful in having that kind of initial seed funding for more creative and innovative programs that can then move forward and grow from there. And then finally, I'll just leave you with the need to provide financial and technical support for municipalities, as those are often the places where a lot of this work ends up happening on the ground, and we need to ensure their capacity to do things like implementing complete streets, smart growth planning, and zoning that also allow for the housing densities that are needed for transportation solutions, and the ability of small towns to take advantage of these funding opportunities and other things that are coming their way. So I will leave it there, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to get the slides to get going, but
that's okay.
They weren't that good.
I think most of us are following along with your slides, and for anybody viewing on YouTube, your presentation is under Katie Gallagher, your name, so folks can see.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Katie, for setting the stage. And so
Jonathan, I think, will be up next.
So why don't you come on up and.
Can I hear from Christina Erickson, Local Motion's Executive Director? Does anyone want a hard copy?
Thank you.
Slides?
If you give them to me, I can get them around. Come on up.
While we're transitioning, I just wanted to say a quick hello. Good morning, everyone. My name is Christina Erickson, and I'm the new Executive Director of Local Motion. Just started about 6 weeks ago. Clayton and I are playing the new People on the Block card, so we're learning lots of things, but so you know, Local Motion's mission is to make it safe, accessible, and fun for everyone to walk, bike, or roll in Vermont. And so my colleague Jonathan is going to run through a few opportunities that we are hoping that you all will support to make it safe, accessible, and fun for everyone. Great. Jonathan, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Not able to get my presentation up, but that's okay. I can still, you're all looking at it anyways.
So we have two presentations under your name on our webpage.
Oh, interesting.
To follow along. One says e-bikes in Vermont. The other one says walking, biking, and rolling in
This is
Vermont.
the walking, biking, and rolling in Vermont.
Okay. Just want to make sure we're all.
Yeah. Yep. So my name is Jonathan Weber. I'm the Complete Streets Program Manager at Local Motion. And thank you all so much for having us here today to talk about walking and biking and rolling and transit and all these things that we all want to see more of in our transportation system. Christina gave you our mission, so I'm not going to repeat it. But one of the things that we know is really critical to achieving our mission and to having a transportation system that serves all Vermonters is infrastructure that really meets the needs of all ages and abilities. There's a really, a movement called 880 Cities, which is about building places around, all ages, meaning an 8-year-old can navigate a place on their own and an 80-year-old can navigate that same place on their own. And of course, everyone in between can as well. And so that's really what we're talking about when we talk about all ages and abilities infrastructure. And so what I'm going to sort of talk through today in these slides is some underlying fundamentals that are helpful to me when I think about what a transportation system looks like that actually serves all people. And there are aspects of this that can actually hopefully help us address some of the financing issues that we face at the state level and also at the municipal level. So the next slide. So on a very basic level, but this is something that I really had to relearn, is this idea of streets versus roads, right? And we've kind of lost this distinction in the US to a large extent. Countries that have really reformed their transportation system, this is really the underlying principle, right? This idea that streets are places to build social and financial wealth in a community. They're a place for people in a community to grow and thrive. And these are complex places, right? You've got kids playing, you've got people coming in and out of stores and crossing streets and cars stopping and people getting in and out. And of course, in that kind of environment, you really need to have low speeds in order for it to be safe, because it's not a predictable place, right? So cars need to go slow. And drivers are often signaled that they need to go slow by the environment itself, but the roadway design also needs to reinforce that. A road, on the other hand, is really, it's a place to move people and goods between communities, right? To move people at high speeds efficiently between those communities. That's the value of a roadway, is that mobility. And roadways are simplified environments, right? If we think about I-89, that's a great, efficient roadway. And it's a very simplified environment, right? We have very few intersections there. The exits are very few and far between. They're all very well controlled. And that's what makes it pretty safe to go fast on I-89. I will note, though, that a road is not necessarily just for cars, right? We can think about railroads as preceding, our very car-centric system now. But it's about moving people and goods efficiently. Then we come to the next slide, and the Strode. And a Strode is, this is sort of a new term, and it's meant to describe something that's not quite a street and not quite a road. It tries to do a little bit of both, and ultimately it fails in pretty much all ways, right? So a Strode is this environment where you have some development along a road that is intended to move a lot of cars between communities, but we've allowed for development to happen in that area. And so there are intersections, there are turns, and all of that complexity mixes with sort of the design of the roadway that encourages higher speeds because of the width and the fact that there are signals that tell people that they should go fast to hit that green light. And so that complexity mixed with speed results in a lot of danger. And so actually the road pictured here, Route 7 in Rutland, on this quarter mile of roadway between February and August of last year, there were two pedestrians injured and one killed just last year, within a quarter mile of that, where that photo was taken. So these are really dangerous places. And they're also very expensive, right? Because you have so much traffic moving on these roads to go to these very car-centric destinations, and because you have so many turn lanes and the need to control all of that movement, you need a lot of lanes and you need a lot of signalization to make it all work. And that's really costly. So they're very expensive for us to deal with. And they're really not supporting the kind of business that we want to see in Vermont. These are places that, the big box stores need in order to compete, right? A Home Depot their model doesn't work in a downtown or a village center, right? They need a huge space to stock a lot of inventory. And so they have to be on the outskirts where they can have a huge parking lot because they can't fit their stuff in a downtown. So when we build these places and maintain them, we're really subsidizing that business model as a state, and we're doing it at the expense of our local communities. So on this next slide and these next few slides, I'm gonna just talk a little bit about what really a safe street looks like for all ages and abilities and what that infrastructure looks like. Acknowledging that what we're building right now in Vermont is moving in that direction in terms of, what we have for biking and for walking. We're not there yet, but this is sort of an evolutionary process, and I'll talk about that a little bit later too. But this is ultimately where we want to go if we want to accommodate all users safely. So at lower speeds, you can have what's called a shared space street. And especially if the built environment is closer to the roadway, this works really well. These are some of the best places in the world to walk around and to just hang out. Provincetown, Massachusetts is shown here. And there are streets in our communities that sort of are close to this, right? We have car access. And, if we just change the design of the street a little bit, it could be a really comfortable place to walk in the street and mix with cars even. The speeds are low enough that people can walk often right in the roadway. Sometimes there's on-street parking, sometimes there is not. And, there are versions of this where cars are excluded entirely, like on Church Street. On the next slide, I'm sort of showing a lower speed street, where there is car access, but maybe this is a neighborhood or just a street where cars are going more slowly. And the design that makes it safe for people biking is really to have some level of protection, ideally. But with these speeds, paint alone, just a painted bike lane can be sufficient. You definitely want to have a sidewalk for people walking, and any crossings on the roadway really need to be short. You don't even necessarily need a stop sign for that crosswalk to be safe, because as long as the distance is really short and the speeds are low, it's going to be pretty safe for a person walking. Next slide. Once we sort of get up into a moderate speed street, and this is where you start to sort of toe the line of Strode, right? When cars start to get up closer to 35 miles an hour. And once those speeds get a little bit higher, you definitely need to have the biking infrastructure totally separated from the street, ideally on the sidewalk side of the curb. And of course, you want, again, separated sidewalks here. And you need to pay some more attention at the intersections of where that walking and biking infrastructure meets the car infrastructure to separate people either in space or time. So a signal separates people in time, basically, and then protected elements like a raised crosswalk or things to slow the cars down sort of protect people as well. On the next slide, what does this all look like on a road, right? Like how can people walk and bike along a road where cars are moving fast? And for sure, along a road, the infrastructure for people walking and biking needs to be fully separated. And as the speeds go higher, the degree of that separation and protection needs to increase. And paying attention to the intersections is really critical on a road, because you don't want to mix high-speed cars with people walking or biking in the roadway. So things like roundabouts can work really well. Signalization, when it's done well, can work here. And also generally just reducing the number of intersections is super important, because those all create new conflict points anytime there's an intersection. This next slide is showing a little bit of what I was talking about earlier, with sort of how this cycle of change has happened in other places. And different communities start at different points, but say an infrastructure improvement occurs in a community, that'll generally result in more people. Some segment of the population will then feel comfortable getting out, walking or biking on that route. That means increased rates of walking, biking, and rolling, increased public support for those investments, increased political support for those investments, and then you get more infrastructure improvements. So it's sort of this positive feedback loop that builds on itself. And these arrows sort of on the outside are to show some of the things that can act as accelerants for this process. So funding is really important, because it increases the rate at which we can build infrastructure and the quality of the infrastructure we can build. Policy, things that, for example, Burlington passed an ordinance allowing people on bikes to cross an intersection when there's an active pedestrian signal in that direction. It's a really simple policy that can make it a little safer for people, a little easier for people to bike.
No, that was somebody's cell phone.
Yeah. And we'll talk about some state level policies that can also help. Technology, e-bikes are an example of a technology that helped accelerate this process. So on the next slide, sort of getting to some specifics here, some great policies that are under consideration in bills in committee here. The update complete streets legislation, providing more training for municipalities to implement these projects, as well as more transparency at the state level about where and how it's happening. Updating the Vermont state standards is an opportunity to really have a document that identifies basically what I was just talking about, like what high quality infrastructure looks like and where it needs to be built in order to be appropriate and context sensitive. Funding, another one of those accelerants, increasing funding for the Bike Ped grant program, I think would really help a lot of municipalities move their projects forward. That program is consistently underfunded. Transit is super, right? A lot of walking and biking trips become transit trips. So having a really high functioning transit system is incredibly important as well. And then technology, promoting e-bikes is super helpful to keeping this thing going and getting more Vermonters out there riding. So that's it for me, and I'll look forward to questions later on.
Well, we can pause for some questions if the committee has any questions for either Katie or Jonathan at this moment. Okay. Molly, Representative Burke.
I think just a comment, and it's just so interesting to see all these, these great designs and things that are done in the streets, and it just strikes me as we're still like using the crumbs left over from the, this is what's important. We got to get the roads, and we do. We have to keep our road network up. We have to make our roads safe. But it just still feels like this is a
fire. So we're having a drill. So